Hello, my brother. Welcome to the Great Man Within podcast. Every episode is designed to help you discover and live the great man within you. Today, we are talking about a tool that most men will never pick up, that provides you a portal, access to mental toughness that most men will never achieve. And I'll share with you what that tool is in a few moments. But first, I want to share with you a story that will help to hammer home why this tool is so important. Back in 2015, I was working at Prudential Retirement. It's where I spent 15 years of my corporate career before doing this. And one of my favorite people of all time that I worked with for pretty much that entire time, Christan Boyle, she went by the name Stan, her beautiful young daughter, Harper Jane, who I believe was 4 or 5 years old at the time, was diagnosed with leukemia. And that kicked off a multi-year process of fear, of uncertainty, of financial burden, of stress that Stan and her family had to navigate in the hopes that her beautiful young daughter, Harper, could survive and live a happy and healthy life. And Harper had to be stripped away from her friends, had to be taken into chemotherapy treatment. She lost her hair. She got sick to her stomach. This was an ordeal for years. And Stan shared with me just recently, this was about 6 or 7 weeks ago, where we had a conversation. She said, Dominic, looking back at that multi-year period of time that Harper was going through that treatment, by far and away, the most miserable part of that multi-year process was the first 30 days after her diagnosis. And I remember stopping in my tracks and being like, that's fascinating. I don't know why. Stan, what was it about those first 30 days that made that so difficult for you? And she said, Dominic, it was torture for me because I was in denial. I resisted the fact that my beautiful, seemingly happy and healthy, definitely happy young child had this potentially life-threatening disease. I was in denial that this could happen to her. I felt like a failure as a mother because maybe somehow I brought this on, right? Like wondering how I could have possibly been involved in this. I feared the fact that she had to be taken away from her friends, that she would get sick to her stomach and lose her hair and not live a happy, normal, childlike lifestyle. I resisted and denied all of that for 30 days. And I wasn't sleeping. I wasn't eating well. I was stressed out. I was pulling my hair out. I wasn't the best version of myself, and I wasn't showing up as the mother that I wanted to be for my daughter who was going through one of the most difficult parts of her life. And so I said, I feel that, Stan. What shifted for you? And she said, sometime after that 30th day, I finally pulled on the one lever that I'd been ignoring, which was acceptance. Accepting the reality that Harper did, in fact, have leukemia, that she was going to go through chemotherapy treatment, that there were uncertainties, that we would have to navigate through fear and financial burden and stress for potentially years to come with no outcome of certainty. But as soon as I accepted that, it's not that everything got easy, but everything got easier because I wasn't fighting the reality of what is. And when that happened, I was able to start to take care of myself, to navigate this from a place of resourcefulness, not from fear. I could show up with love for my daughter, not from a place of anxiety and fear. And a few years later, in 2017, Harper Jane had her last chemotherapy treatment. And today she's happy, she's healthy, full remission, cancer-free from what we all know today. And she's living a happy, healthy, normal lifestyle, but with the heart of a lion and the spirit of a champion who went through something that a lot of other kids thankfully never will have to. And Stan became a deeper, stronger, more powerful woman as a result. At the beginning of this quarantine, I pulled the book off the shelf, Man's Search for Meaning, written by Viktor Frankl. And Viktor Frankl was a Holocaust survivor. He spent 3 years in concentration camps, torn away from his family who was exterminated. He was beaten and he was starved. He had all of his freedoms stripped from him. He controlled nothing in his life, nothing in his external environment. The only thing that he had control over was his inner state of being. How he chose to show up every day, the attitude that he brought, the ability to make meaning out of seemingly meaningless situation. And as a result of that, that gave him enough fire to continue living when many other men's fires burned out. And as a result of that, he ended up writing books that have healed and inspired millions of people in the decades that have followed. And the quote that he wrote about in the book that gives us so much direction and guidance in this time, he says, when we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. He couldn't change his situation, not the environment that he was in. Everything external, all of the circumstances were out of his control. The only thing that he had control over was his inner state of being. And look how that turned out for him. Stan fought for 30 days the reality of what was. And when she could no longer change that situation, she had to change her inner state of being. And she became an inspiration for all of us in the Prudential family. That's where I used to work, Prudential Financial. She started a Facebook page and would send these beautiful updates of each chemotherapy treatment and the reality of Harper's journey. Sometimes it was sad pictures. Harper was exhausted. She was tired. She was worn down. Other days, she was vibrant and beautiful and alive and energizing and funny and silly and goofy, just like any other kid. And while going through that journey, all of us had a chance to be inspired, to tap into all of our emotions. And Stan gave us the gift of letting us in on that journey only because she had accepted the reality. She hadn't given up. She accepted. You know, when I went on my very biggest journey when it came to meditation, this was 2016, where I did the 10-day silent meditation. Many of you have heard of that, speak of this before. And I've spoken about how that was one of the most confronting and challenging experiences of my life. You give up the ability to talk. I willingly committed to not talking, not looking anyone else in the eye. There's no information consumption. You're not reading books or magazines. You're not watching television. You've given up your phone for 10 days. There's no reading, writing, exercise. You can't journal, can't take notes. Everything is internally oriented. And for the first 2 days of that experience, I was in torment. My body was aching. My mind was racing. There were pains inside of me that I didn't know existed. I couldn't get comfortable. I couldn't sit still. My mind couldn't focus. My whole entire being was so conditioned to the comforts of the movements of my life, of organizing all of the circumstances in the external parts of my world, eating what I wanted to eat, getting a sugar treat when I wanted sugar, consuming information when I got bored. I'd organized my life in such a way where as long as those things were in place, I was happy. But once I relinquished all of those things, for those first 48 hours, I was in pain. And it was only on the third day where there was a deeper level, full body and soul acceptance of the reality of that journey that I was on, was I finally able to drop into the experience and to do so with incredible power and to learn lessons of my life that have forever changed my life, have forever shifted my perspective. There is a calm that's deep inside of me that did not exist before that 10-day experience. And one of the things that I learned when I was at that meditation retreat was that all of suffering comes down to two things: craving that which we want and cannot get, and aversion to the things that we do not want, and yet they show up in our experience. Craving. For those first 48 hours, all I craved was coffee, craved pornography, craved talking to someone, craved reading something intellectually stimulating or watching something that could take me out of whatever it was that I was feeling, craved running, exercising to get that energy unstuck. And when I couldn't experience any of those things, I suffered. Aversion to the experiences and to the feelings that I did not want, negative emotion, trying to avoid discomfort, avoid pain, wanting it to go away, versus asking it questions about why it's here, what it could be telling me, the deeper wisdom. Organizing our entire lives around not having to feel the pain of failure or rejection. But when those things come, we suffer. Just like the era that we're in right now, where negative sentiments, negative news, uncertainty about the future, we're averse to all of these things. And when that happens, if we fight what is, if we resist what is, when I resist what is, it brings a deeper level of suffering. There's a difference between pain and suffering. We all experience pain. We're humans. Suffering is the meaning that we make out of that pain. Suffering is a choice. Resisting what is, fighting the reality. And like Stan said, right, it never became easy, but once she shifted from resistance to acceptance, it became easier. Viktor Frankl, for 3 years living in a concentration camp, there's nothing easy about that. But he found a way to relieve himself of certain resistance that he had brought to allow him to survive. Acceptance is not giving up. Acceptance is not weakness. Acceptance is a tool that offers you a portal to a next level of mental toughness that allows you to navigate nearly any situation that is thrown your way. Or at least that's been my experience. When I started practicing Nichiren Buddhism back in 2013, which was something I spent about 18 months practicing, I remember reading a piece of literature where they talked about the 10 worlds. And I really only remember 3 of those 10 worlds. The lowest level world is hell. That is the arena of no hope, hopelessness, right? Hell. The 10th world, the highest world, is enlightenment. 2 things that probably don't surprise you. But the thing that did surprise me was the 7th world was nirvana, or heaven. And I grew up as a Catholic, and I remember scratching my head because heaven, nirvana, is the ultimate in the Catholic faith, in the Christian faith, right? That's the end of, that's like all, that's where you want to go. And so I got curious as to why nirvana and heaven were only at stage number 7. And I remember when I started inquiring about that, the answer I got back was, in the Nichiren Buddhism context, heaven is described as when all of the world's external factors are arranged to your liking perfectly. But that is a temporary experience because life is forever changing. Everything is transient. Everything is impermanent. And as soon as one of those factors change, like the job becomes harder, like a global pandemic hits, like your child is not behaving the way that you want him or her to, as soon as one of those things shifts, then it's no longer to our liking. We have dropped out of our center of peace and we start to crave, or we start to be averse to what's happening, and then we suffer. You see, there is a difference between wanting something, desiring something, and then suffering because you don't have it. Do you get that? There's a difference between wanting something, right? Desiring something, and then suffering because you don't have it. I desire a deep, loving, and committed relationship with a woman of my dreams who I can raise a family with, build a future with. I desire that. I don't have that physically in this space right now. And I could choose to suffer and have anguish for the fact that that doesn't exist in my life. I could find all of the reasons to wallow. Instead, I choose to desire that and connect to what that would feel like on a daily basis in a way that feels great, even though it's not here in physical form. There are many things in my life that aren't quite so easy, right? Where I do suffer and still suffer because I bring it upon myself because there's something that I'm resisting. And I recognize now that when I do resist, or that when I'm suffering, it's a clue that there's something in my reality, in my mindset, in the way that I'm operating, in my belief system, that is causing me to resist and fight what is. And as soon as I pick up this tool of acceptance, I can walk through a portal and access a next level of mental toughness that allows me to navigate almost any situation that comes my way. To this date, it's been the thing that has allowed me to navigate nearly every situation that has come my way. So I'd like to leave you with the question of, where are you resisting in your life right now that's causing suffering that's unnecessary, not needed? Who are you resisting? What are you resisting? And where can you bring acceptance that would allow it to just become a little bit easier? Hey, I just want to give you the heads up that in the next month or two, we're going to be moving to a new schedule for our podcast releases to Mondays and Fridays. Mondays are going to be the interview days, or the days where Brian and I end up on the show together. Fridays are going to be DQ solo time. This is my chance to connect with you, show you what's going on in my mind, my heart, what I'm envisioning for the future of men's work and inner work, and how we can get on this path of becoming the great man together. Now, I don't know exactly when that date is, but I want you to know it, give you the heads up, because we've gone over these last few weeks from everyday podcasts to now we're doing 3 days a week. Monday is kind of like the feature episode, the long form, typically an interview, both Brian and I. And then Wednesday and Friday are solo episodes. And I'm going to be moving that to a Friday only DQ solo episode at some point in the next month, 2 or 3 months. I don't know exactly when it is, but I wanted to prepare you for it because I know a lot of you really loved the daily format and were like, no, don't go to 3 days a week. But I'm doing this because I'm building stuff out online that's going to allow us to connect with one another much more effectively, more programs, more opportunities to do challenges, to find other men across the world or even in your local community that you can do this inner work with. So even if it may seem like a takeaway right now, I can guarantee you that it's all going towards building something much bigger and better in the future. So as always, I continue to thank you for your support, and you can continue to expect the best from me.